NWA coming to us in November 12th and 13th. It'll be NWA Hard Times 3 and the Revolution Rumble from the Frederick J. Segura Civic Center in New Orleans, one of my favorite cities. My first Super Bowl was there. Big event, and someone that will figure prominently in that event joins me now on the Vaqueros Cafe and Cantina Hotline. Not only is he a former TNA world champion, for twice he held the oldest and most recognized championship in the sport, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and one hell of a wrestler. He is Nick Aldis. Follow him on Twitter at Real Nick Aldis. Nick, I've been wanting to have you on the show for so long, so I appreciate the time. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, Stu. That was very nice introduction. I'm happy to be here and excited about this event in New Orleans also.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. It kind of floored me when I was doing a little research for the interview. You've got almost 20 years in wrestling. That's a good chunk of time. What do you attribute your longevity to?
Well, I guess the easiest answer is I started very young. So I don't, it's funny when it gets sort of presented to me like that, it's sort of alarming to me too, because I sort of go, is that right? But I suppose it's like the old adage, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. There are times where a career in professional wrestling very much feels like work. But, I set my sights on it very early in life. I was around the age of about 12 or 13. I saw, that it was around the year 2000 was when the WWF in the year 2000 was just, it was led by The Rock and Triple H, that rivalry. And that rivalry was the thing that made me kind of go, I think I want to do this. I think I want to do more than just be a spectator. And I just I put all the other sports that I was involved in. I was a pretty good athlete as a kid in high school and stuff, but they all just started to sort of fall by the wayside because I just became sort of focused on a career in wrestling and started doing, even at that age, started working towards what do I need to do to be able to make this happen. And then by the time I was 17, I was training. And by the time I was 18, I was pretty much wrestling full time. So I was fortunate in that respect, because in the UK at that point, there was the opportunity to work full time because of Brian Dixon and All Star Wrestling and that schedule that they had. They were running 200 and somewhere between 200 and 300 shows a year. So if you could kind of get on that crew, then you could get the experience and you could wrestle all the time. You didn't make a lot of money, but you gained the experience and you were living the life. And I just sort of dove in head first and never looked back.
Man, it's amazing. I want to ask you about, before he passed away, you had forged a really good bond with the former 8-time world champion Harley Race, and you guys, it was very evident. What's that big lesson that you learned from him that sticks with you even today?
I would say the main thing I learned from Harley is that there's a way to wrestle. There are different ways to perform, and that not any single one of them is the right way. But Harley taught me that there is a way to be a champion wrestler that is different from other wrestlers. It's not just about how you wrestle. It's about making sure that leading up to the match, that you're doing everything to create this anticipation for the match, making sure that you put enough value in your opponent, which I think is something that is greatly missing in most of the business today. Is guys go out, they have a hot mic, and they're looking for a meme moment, they're looking for a shock value moment, and they just completely insult, their opponent. And that's cheap. It's low hanging fruit. Ultimately, in the long run, you know, wrestlers, we all want to be sort of building each other up. You know, the rivalries need to be built out of animosity, sure, and, you know, personal issues draw money, no doubt about it. But there's a way to go out and sort of verbally kind of get after your opponent without completely destroying their value, you know, without completely burying them and just kind of and making fun of them and making them sort of, you know, diminishing their value. Harley taught me a lot of that. Rick taught me some of that. Dory taught me some of that. Mm-hmm. You know, it was that thing of you've got to carry yourself in a way that not you don't you can't go around telling telling everyone you're better than them, right? You have to let people decide that for themselves. You know, so you can't change everybody's mind in terms of whether they like the way you wrestle or they like the way you talk or any of those things. But what you can do is you can make your professionalism undeniable, you know, and that's like, I can think of little moments where I've been, when I was defending the title, for example, you know, I defended that belt in front of 100 people and in front of 10,000 people. But each time I approached it with the same amount of professionalism, you know, and the same amount of dedication, the same amount of thought. And that, you know, that's probably the main thing I learned from Harley. And also to always keep your wits about you, to make sure that you're always making sure that you protect what you've built, you know, in terms of, I know it's not as likely anymore, but I was brought up by old shooters in England too. So it was like, you know, there's always that thing of if someone tries to take liberties with you in the ring, you know, you need to be able to know how to handle it. And Harley showed me a lot of that too, you know, because nobody messed with Harley Race. Right. And I'm just very blessed that I know I'm going long here, but the other thing I guess from Harley was that praise was not something that he handed out easily. So it made you appreciate it when you finally got it. For a perfect example, the NWA had been in such a state prior to me getting involved and you know, in 2017 and the work that David Lagana and I did and, you know, and so on in that year, that Harley had basically said he'd washed his hands of the NWA. He didn't want anything to do with it. You know, he wasn't happy with how it had been presented and how the belt had been presented and stuff like that. You know, fast forward 2 years, and obviously Harley knew me from going to his camp, but I don't think that was the factor. It was he had paid attention to what had been done, you know, stuff that Cody and I had done, the story that Cody and I had told all around, based around his family history with Dusty and the, you know, the significance of the title to him and everything like that. And the work I had done defending the title in, you know, about 8 different countries, 4 different continents. I was the first guy to take it to China. And I know that one particularly meant a great deal to Harley because he said like that was the one place he'd never been able to take it. So when he then turned around and said, yeah, I want to acknowledge it, but I want him to come to Missouri and defend the title, you know, that was the ultimate sort of endorsement for me. And Harley, as it happened, you know, sad as it may be, as in terms of, it's not something that I sort of brag about as a sort of feather in my cap, but Harley's last recorded interview before he passed away was with me, you know, and that's something that I will always cherish.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that interview. It was such a great look, and I was such
an amateur. You know, I've never really interviewed someone before. I wasn't a polished interviewer like yourself, but so it was a little choppy at times, but it was fun.
But it was wonderful because it was kind of like what you said. It was the NWA of the present bridging to the NWA of the Harley Races and Dory Funks and Ric Flairs and all that good stuff, and I love that. That was such a, you know, I mean, I was a fan, you know, from back in the 70s and 80s. You know, I loved it, and it was so good to see that. And something else that it's kind of something you kind of hinted at, your skills on the microphone, and it harkens back. It may, you know, first name that comes to mind when I listen to you speak is Nick Bockwinkel, the former AWA world champion, because it like you said, there are ways to, obviously you get the animosity, you get whatever the issue is that's leading up to the match, but at the same time you're still, you know, putting your opponent up as a worthy opponent that you need to take seriously. And that was something that I have seen, I've heard in your skills in the microphone. Just talk for a second about how you developed that and how, I mean, what were some of the influences that go into your work on the microphone?
Well, first of all, it's very kind of you to say, and you're not the first person to draw the Bockwinkel comparison. And I left Bockwinkel out of the guys I was mentioning before, but that's, I never had a chance to meet Nick Bockwinkel, and certainly I would have jumped at that. I do see the comparison. I have studied a lot of Bockwinkel. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say, he was before my time, and I wasn't exposed to the AWA until I was in the business and really studying. And then I was sort of finding as much as I could. And obviously now with WWE, with their incredible library and, what they've done with the network and Peacock and stuff, it's easier than ever. And it's, for a guy like me, a student of the game who loves to watch old wrestling and, find all these things that can be redone in a new way. It's so easy now. I love it. But Bockwinkel, I think that he understood that in my opinion, there are two ways to really be valuable in this industry. One is to be an attraction, right? To be the Hulk Hogan or the Andre the Giant or the Brock Lesnar or somebody like that, the guy who's the sort of the star attraction, the person who just has an intangible sort of factor to them, Steve Austin, The Rock, or you can be the guy that, or you can be the guy that people pay to see get beaten by those people. So in that regard, I would put at the top of that list, I would put Triple H, I would put Nick Bockwinkel, I would put Harley, and I would put Flair. Flair, of course, you could say kind of straddles that line because he's such an attraction in his own right, but ultimately Rick's long-term value was built off the idea that, everywhere he went, people paid to see if someone could beat this guy, and that's how I felt like Bockwinkel did too. And I was very aware early on that as a British guy coming to America, the chances of me being the red, white, and blue, all-American hero sort of guy winning the main event at WrestleMania was slim. But I didn't necessarily visualize myself that way. A lot of the time I visualized myself as I'd be more likely to be the guy going in as the incumbent champion, and then providing that obstacle for the ultimate hero to overcome. So in a very sort of basic sense, I figured out pretty early on that I needed to be Apollo, not Rocky. And, I've heard Triple H kind of mention similar things, and I studied a lot of him and, tried to learn a lot from him, and obviously not a bad guy to study given where he's at today. But he said something similar. He looked at the landscape in 2000 and went, well, hold on, you've got Rock, you've got Austin, you've got Taker, and you've got Mick Foley, 4 huge stars, but they're all fan favorites. They need a villain. They need an antagonist. And I've tried to sort of pride myself, really focused in the last few years, especially to try to be the ultimate antagonist. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always hated, but I'm always trying to provide a situation where if somebody beats me, it's a big deal, whether that's an independent show or whether it's a pay-per-view and, being seen around the world. I was always tried my best to sort of make it feel like, hey, when someone gets the hand raised over you, it's a significant thing for their career. And I think that that's happened. Obviously I'm not trying to overstate it because there's levels to this game, but I think from the resources that I've had available to me and the exposure that I've had available to me, I think I've done a pretty good job of that. And that's what was taught to me by Harley and Dory and guys like that, was like, you have to believe it before they can believe it. And you have to be able to create a situation where if somebody beats you, it's a big deal, and that begins and ends with your commitment. It starts in your eyes. From the moment you walk out, you've got to make everyone believe like, okay, well, some of this other stuff might be, even if the rest of the card, they might think, oh, this stuff's kind of phony. but this guy's the real deal. You know, that's always the way that I've tried to approach my career.
It's like I said, it's been that way, and I've noticed that it's very it's entertaining is not the right word, but it is entertaining to listen
Compelling.
to you.
I try to be
Yes, there we
compelling.
go.
Yeah. And you asked me before, and I apologize, I didn't answer, but you know, in terms of big guys that I studied, you know, Flair obviously is right up there in terms of interviews. I studied a lot of Flair, a lot of Bockwinkel, Rock, Dusty. You know, not necessarily always. Obviously, I didn't try to emulate, you know, Dusty. No one can emulate Dusty, but just I try to pick up on where he takes people. I've always looked at promos the same way as you look at a match, right? I think that they're the same thing. You want to have a good solid opening that kind of grabs people's attention and gets them settled in and goes, okay, time to pay attention, right? Like there was this great interview once, and it's a Muhammad Ali interview, and he's surrounded by press, and there's all these people, yeah, can we get it, and he's looking to this one guy, like there's a camera in front of him, and he says, is this live? Are we live? And the guy says, yeah, we're live right now. And he goes, everybody stop talking now, attention. And the whole place just stops, you know, and then he goes off, and then he starts, I told you I was the greatest of all time, I told you I'm the champion of the world, you know. And it's like just little things like that, like instead of just going right into it, like do something to set the tone, right? Like, hey, everybody stop talking now, pay attention, you know. Like I always try to open with something that you know sets the table and makes everybody go, okay, all right, put your phones down, you know, stop what you're doing for the next 2 minutes, you're going to look into my eyes, you're going to listen to me. You know, it's impossible, you know, you obviously, it's like anything, you're striving to hit that home run every single time, you know, but obviously some are better than others, but and then you want to take, like a match, you want to take him on a good solid opening, you want to sort of get a bang bang bang, something that kind of gets them excited, and then you want to settle it down a little bit where they go through the middle, and that's where you talk about the meat of the matter, that's where you might get into some details about what you're doing, you know, and then you start to speed it up, you bring, hopefully by but the stuff you've done in the middle has captivated them enough and got their emotions going enough where now you can drive it home with a really strong finish, and then leave before they get tired of you. Yeah, like Brian Dixon, the greatest promoter in British wrestling history. You know, the most valuable lesson I ever learned from him was he would always say, always leave them wanting more. And again, something that is just is not done now in wrestling. It drives me bonkers, you know, to go to so many shows and I go, wait, there's 12 matches on this card. You know, why is this show 4 hours? You know, like these people paid, like they're here to have a good time. By the time they leave, you want them going, oh man, I can't wait to come back. That was incredible. I can't believe that was 3 hours. You don't want them by the main event looking at their watch and going, well, it's been fun, but boy, I'm tired. You know, I can't wait to go. I kind of want to go home now. Like that's the last thing you want. Like you want to leave them wanting more. So, you know, that's another thing I looked at. But again, because I've tried to maintain a balance of looking at this through the eyes of someone who loves the business, right? Like as a fan, but also as an entrepreneur. You know, I've always tried to look at it as a business as well. Like reminded myself, like, hey, this is how you're gonna pay your bills. You know, you have to pay a certain amount of respect to running this as a business and not making decisions based on, you know, your taste or emotion or anything like that. And I think that the wrestling business gets often caught up in a lot of those conflicts because a certain person, usually the person running the show or, you know, the ultimate decision maker, they get too wrapped up in making decisions based on their own taste, you know, based on what they like, you know, and oftentimes, you know, many a failed wrestling venture has been because the show is for an audience of one, right? And you have to be able to maintain a sort of an outlook of, okay, it might not be what I like, but it's what's best for business. It's what the audience likes, you know, and trying to hit all those marks. And it's not easy because it's a constantly changing thing.
It's not easy. You're absolutely right. Since 2017, I would say that you have been the face of the National Wrestling Alliance. And this is even today, even without holding the title, you're still the face. What are you most proud of besides winning the 2 world titles? What are you most proud of with your time in the NWA? Again, being the face of the NWA, what are you most proud of with the company?
Well, that's kind of you to say, and I think I mean, you've sort of answered it in the question. I think that it is, again, something that I always tried to envision myself as. If you're not shooting for the top, then what's the point? I have enjoyed the fact that I've been the face of the company, and the brand, and I do appreciate that it's still the case. Even a year after holding the title. I mean, I haven't held the title since. I dropped it last summer. I think for me, it's that, and the fact that there are now a good number of people who have a regular paycheck coming in from pro wrestling because of the sacrifices that I made and the work that I did. And obviously Billy's financing it, and he's the ultimate decision maker now. But I think that when I look around and I see, some of them are my friends and some of the people I greatly admire and respect. And to know that they're now getting, a regular payment in their bank account every couple of weeks, for being a pro wrestler, because the NWA, Billy felt comfortable enough with me steering the ship, so to speak, that that he could grow it to that level where some of the boys could get taken care of and they can pay their bills and they can feed their families. That's probably the ultimate sort of high point for me.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and like I said, it has been must-see viewing since 2017 all the way up to now with the pay-per-views and the series on YouTube and everything. So I congratulate you and everybody with the NWA. Let's talk for a second about your match at NWA Hard Times 3. You're facing Odison. Odison, for a long time, one half of the end with Pero. Great tag team. Now he is broken out as a singles wrestler. Just give me your scouting report on Odison, who you're going to face in New Orleans.
Well, I think I saw him coming, quite a long time, maybe before he even did. Obviously, the physical attributes are pretty obvious there to see. Guys are a great physical specimen and very athletic. Now, for me, this is a perfect example of what I was sort of touching on before. That there's only so many spots in other in other wrestling promotions, right? And so there are a lot of guys who are very capable and are waiting for their opportunity, and a lot of the time that means it doesn't necessarily mean getting a contract or getting signed, or whatever. A lot of the time it means getting a high profile match with the right opponent. And I was very blessed to get several of those, Sting, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, on and on it goes. So I understood how important that was, because I knew that regardless of what happened with my contractual status with TNA at that point, no one could ever take away the fact that I've now been in the ring in the main event with AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Sting, Jeff Hardy, so on and so on. And obviously that, contributes to your ability to make a living. So if I can, not that I'm putting myself anywhere near those gentlemen that I just mentioned in terms of status, obviously, but if a guy like Odinson can have a good showing against a guy like me, and make a name for himself, how about it? And the onus is going to be on him. He's going to have to show up and deliver, and he's going to have to earn everything that he gets in there. But it's a match I'm looking forward to, because this is where matches like this is where you really separate like the men from the boys, so to speak, in terms of, okay, it's one thing to, if you've had a gimmick, right, and let's say you've had a run in WWE, you know, and you've got some stuff that you know works, and it's kind of, you know, it's, you got a formula or whatever, you could show up and you can go, hey, book me with this other guy who's also a star, who's also been in WWE and also done this stuff. And you can kind of guarantee that you'll get a good reaction, right? But what can you do when you're working with a guy who doesn't have that profile, right? Can you create a situation where this is one of the most anticipated matches on the card, you know, in spite of the fact that on paper it doesn't necessarily excite a lot of people because they don't necessarily know one of the participants? That's the true test of whether you can, that's when you can really see where you are, right, as far as a market value and as an attraction. Because, you know, it's like I said, it's one thing to make it happen when you're sharing the spotlight with someone on equal stature. Whole different thing to do it with someone who's, you know, less further along in their career. And I love that challenge, and I can't wait to you know, take up that challenge at the Hard Times pay-per-view.
Absolutely. It is NWA Hard Times 3. That'll be November 12th, and then Revolution Rumble alongside Wildcat Sports on November 13th. Both events coming from the Frederick J. Segura Civic Center in New Orleans. NWATIX.com for tickets, or if you can't be there, get it on Fight TV. He is the former two-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis. Follow him on Twitter at Real Nick Aldis. Nick, I tell you what, this, as I said, I've been wanting you on my show for quite a while, and this has been a fantastic interview. It's been captivating. I was hanging on you every word. I loved it. I wish you all the best. Your lovely wife Mickey is a great friend of our show. I've talked to her so many times at the Super Bowl. I wish you and your family all the best. Have a great time in New Orleans, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Stu. Thank you very much.